The level of tension in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has reached an all-time high. Every time Russia launches an offensive, our Ukrainian fighters inflict regretful losses on the adversary. This is something that we are aware of. Since the Russian invaders have sustained such severe casualties over the past few weeks, they are out of bullets and cannot continue to fire without being selective. Over the course of the previous few weeks, Russia has taken the lives of a significant number of civilians who were living on Ukrainian soil. These people spent each night without knowing what might happen next. Our Ukrainian troops demonstrated to those guilty of the atrocities that were committed against their country that they would not go unpunished. Let's take a look at the specifics of the situation. The Ukraine carried out a number of drone attacks deep within the territory of their adversary. As a result, Russia was subjected to the most intense shelling of any single night throughout the war. At the same time that the strikes took place, Ukraine was also the target of a major night attack, which has been described as the most powerful missile onslaught since spring. The strikes targeted the regions of Pskov, Bryansk, and Kaluga, as well as all of Ryazan and Moscow, prompting residents of those areas to become hysterical out of terror. According to reports from Russian authorities, Russia's air defenses shot down the majority of the drones while they were flying overhead. There is no official information available regarding the precise number of drones that participated in the raid. On the other hand, many media outlets reported that a flock of more than 20 drones carried out the operation. Estimates provided by the relevant authorities indicate that the explosion began at approximately 23:40 and continued for approximately 2 hours. The fact that the assault lasted for such a lengthy period of time, of course, contributed to the heightened severity of the explosions. As a result of the explosions, the streets took on a black appearance. There was smoke in every single room. However, sources claim that the most significant attack took place at the Pskov airport in western Russia, which is about 30 kilometers, 19 miles, from the Estonian border. Let's take a look at what went down in the city of Pskov, which was the site of the attack that resulted in the most damage. The airport in Pskov, which is located approximately 400 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, was the target of the most devastating attack. A surprise target was identified as scarves by Russian media and military bloggers a few hours after the bombing. The airport is situated a distance of 64 kilometers from both the Baltic Sea and the European Union and NATO. Large explosions that illuminated the night sky have been reported in the neighboring countries of Estonia and Latvia. First, one of the drones reportedly crashed into bulk fuel tanks at Pskov airport. This information was gleaned from media reports. There was a significant fire that broke out at the Pskov airport. The regional governor, Mikhail Verdinnikov, issued an order to cancel all aircraft coming into and leaving from the airport in the city. Emergency services for ILL reported that 76 military transport aircraft were damaged during the incident. These aircraft are assigned to the Airborne Assault Division of the 76th Guard Regiment of the Russian Air Force. A brand new Il-76 will set you back 5 billion rubles in terms of its price. Due to the fact that the Russian Federation only produces between 1 and 5 of these types of aircraft each year, Russia has suffered a catastrophic loss as a result of this strike, and this airplane is just one of them. Dinnikov indicates that there were no casualties and that the fire has been brought under control. According to the Pskov Gubernia Telegram channel, a fire broke out on the territory of the 64,044 military unit near the Pskov airport. However, the Telegram channel reports that there were no casualties. According to officials who are analyzing the area, it is possible that between 10 and 20 drones assaulted the airport. According to reports, this area is part of the territory occupied by the 2nd Special Forces Brigade stationed in Promyjitsi by the GRU, which took part in the invasion of Ukraine. The Russian military incurred casualties in the form of soldiers on the airfield as well as a significant number of damaged strategic bombers as a direct result of long-range drone attacks carried out by the Ukrainian military. Alexander Bogomaz, the governor of the Bryansk area, stated that his hometown was also damaged by the 6 drone strikes that occurred overnight. An administrative building was damaged by one of the drones, which started a fire that was extinguished quickly. Bogomaz reported that 2 unmanned aerial vehicles successfully targeted a television tower. The sustained assault resulted in the destruction of the television towers. This attack on Russian cities has left the public feeling profoundly frightened. They are already struggling to cope with the restrictions and hardship that the war has inflicted upon them. According to Governor Andrew Klitschkov, 2 drones were also brought down in the oil sector by the security forces. According to the officials, 3 additional planes were brought down by enemy fire, 2 of them in the Moscow region and 1 in the Ryazan region. Bryansk is located in close proximity to the oil and Kaluga areas, while the Moscow region can be found in the upper part of the Kaluga region. Shortly after these attacks, Russia launched an assault on 4 Ukrainian vessels that were traveling across the Black Sea. Each boat was carrying up to 50 soldiers. Sadly, this heinous attack on our community claimed the lives of 2 people. Soon after that, there were reports of hearing at least 3 big explosions in the central area of Kiev. This morning, about 5 a.m., Sergei Popko, who is the head of the military administration for the city of Kiev, posted an update via Telegram stating that 2 individuals had been killed by falling debris. According to Popko, there was also a person who was injured, and continued medical assistance is being provided. The conflict that has been going on between Russia and Ukraine has not let up. The offensive that was waged against the enemy by Ukrainian fighters has worn them down to the point of exhaustion. The splendor of the Russian artillery, which is being called the god of war in Moscow, is fading. The Russian artillery is being forced to depart from their long-standing doctrine as a result of the deteriorating conditions on the battlefield. The historic foundation of Russia's military might has been one that prioritizes quantity of fire over precision. This has been the case despite the initial stage of Moscow's large-scale invasion of Ukraine. However, a report by some analysts suggests that this is beginning to change. The report provides insight on a number of topics. To begin, the Russian soldiers do not have sufficient ammo to keep up this level of fire. Second, long-range precision strikes are very likely to find and target the logistics that allow such a large fire to start. Third, the effectiveness of this mass technique for battling fires is decreasing as a result of the loss of counter batteries, radar, and barrel wear. The Russian artillery now places a greater emphasis on precision than on volume. Additionally, the Russian military suffers from a severe lack of human resources. It makes no difference whether the people involved are officers or troops. Even if Russia were to succeed in producing a well-trained military, they would still be constrained by their production capacity. Throughout the large-scale combat, Ukraine's long-range attacks on ammunition storage facilities and rising logistical challenges have caused the Russian army to run out of artillery rounds. As a result, the Russian army is famished. It is highly unlikely that this hunger will be relieved for a very long period of time. We are all aware that President Vladimir Zelensky paid a visit to troops serving on the front lines the week before last. It would appear that this visit provided a significant amount of motivation for the troops. The soldiers that have been stationed to the east of Ukraine's main counter-offensive zone have begun a fresh series of offensives and are achieving some success with them. Since it began at the beginning of June, Kiev's counterattack has made progress of approximately 10 kilometers in crucial regions. After a period of 3 months of warfare, close attacks by Ukrainian Navy brigades have burst through Russian defenses that were surrounding the settlement of Severodonetsk, and they are advancing. The president singled out the commander of the 36th Marine Brigade, Viktor Sokoza, for his personal leadership during an awards ceremony that was held at the headquarters of the 36th Marine Brigade. During counter-offensive operations, the 36th and other significant formations in the southern Donetsk region are acting as a single formation along a major offensive axis. This is done in order to maximize the effectiveness of the counterattack. The adversary began offensive operations in the regions of Severodonetsk and Novomaisk after a period of several days spent preparing artillery for the assault. The Russian minefields eventually became less effective as a result of the intense artillery work that was being done. As a direct consequence of this, the adversary was unable to approach near to our lines, and our Ukrainian combatants were able to rally their infantry with virtually no casualties. If the Ukrainians can gain control of the twin settlements, each of which contains an important highway bridge over the Shaitanka River, it may be possible for them to provide Kiev a stronger momentum for its slow-moving counter-attack. Naturally, all of us are ecstatic about the fact that all of these developments are going in Ukraine's favor. We are keeping our fingers crossed that all hostile forces will be withdrawn from Ukrainian territory as quickly as possible. The Russian defenses have been breached by Ukrainian forces, and the latter are making steady headway in their counteroffensive against Moscow's armed forces. They were able to successfully damage Russian supply lines behind the front lines using artillery, missile batteries, and drones loaded with explosives. This was accomplished in spite of hard and difficult fighting. Since the beginning of the counteroffensive in Ukraine, drones have emerged as an important instrument for the Ukrainian armed forces to use in their efforts to expel Russian occupying forces from Ukrainian land. Recently, dramatic new escalations have been circulating online in which Ukrainian military are shown using low-cost FPV drones, often known as first-person view drones, to carry out kamikaze-style strikes on their intended targets. You can see the moment when a Ukrainian FPV drone performs a direct attack, hitting a Russian soldier in the head as he fires at the location of Ukrainian troops. This moment is captured in this film. The footage shows what appears to be a number of Russian soldiers clearly visible in the trenches, which appeared to be located in an open field close to the town of Bakhmut. The village of Bakhmut is currently the focus of a counterattack by the Ukrainian military due to the fact that the surveillance drone identified the Russian troops. It was seen that the FPV drone was flying in the direction of its objective. It seemed as though the drone flew directly into the trench, where it then struck one of the Russian soldiers who was inside the trench. A portable anti-aircraft missile system was being fired by a Russian soldier who was hidden in a building close to Bakhmut when he was hit by a Ukrainian first-person view (FPV) drone, according to other footage. In addition, an FPV drone can be seen in this film destroying the most recent breakthrough tank developed by Russia. Tanks were spotted traveling along streets that had been ravaged by the destruction of individual residences. As soon as the drone operator spotted the tank, they activated a kamikaze drone, located a vulnerable area on the military vehicle, and guided the drone to attack there. You can also see an FPV drone crashing into a light-armored multifunctional transport vehicle Mount LB in this film. The LB was attempting to pull a tank that was already in place. The footage shows Russian soldiers frantically trying to get out before a drone is seen slamming into the truck and causing an explosion that turns the vehicle into smoke. According to a report by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the Ukrainian Armed Forces have killed roughly 266,900 Russian soldiers in Ukraine since February 24, 2022. This number includes 610 soldiers killed on the last day alone. A total of 4,506 Russian tanks, 8,703 Russian armored fighting vehicles, 5,722 Russian artillery systems, and several other pieces of Russian military hardware have been destroyed by Ukrainian forces. During this time, Ukraine has been engaged in combat with the primary portion of the Severodonetsk line while simultaneously advancing farther into the pocket and gaining additional terrain. And despite the fact that it was a terrible fight, experts suggest that Ukrainian soldiers were able to move through the anti-vehicle ditches and the dragon's teeth in order to reach the fighting positions held by the Russians. However, Kyiv has not been successful in creating a breach in the fortifications that is large enough to allow the heavy armor to pass through. Ukrainian military authorities have suggested that the next level of Russian defenses could be easier to overcome as a result of Moscow's struggle to keep sufficient people to protect all of its lines of defense. In certain instances, Russia has even been compelled to reposition its elite military forces. They are making progress, perhaps not as much as we hoped for, but they are gradually gaining ground, some 100 meters per day, which indicates that when the Ukrainians are gaining ground, the Russians are losing ground. The Ukrainians made the decision to launch the offensive because they are going to liberate their land, and they are making progress. You also need to have the beginning in mind at all times. According to what NATO President Stoltenberg said on Thursday, the beginning point is the fact that the Russian army was formerly ranked as the second strongest in the world, and now the Russian army is ranked as the second strongest in Ukraine. He stated that it was obvious that this counterattack would be difficult and bloody since Russia had built layers of defensive lines with trenches with obstacles to battle, tanks, dragons, fangs, barriers, and a tremendous amount of mines. He remarked that it was clear that this counterattack would be difficult and bloody. Stoltenberg remarked that the bravery, will, devotion, and resolve of Ukrainian soldiers are what are making this achievement possible. This is a tremendous feat on the part of the Ukrainians. When the full-scale assault started in February of the previous year, he recalled that the majority of analysts predicted that Kyiv would fall within a few days and that Ukraine would fall within a few weeks. According to him, the Ukrainians showed them that they were incorrect by driving the Russian invaders back, freeing the territory in the north and around Kyiv, the territory in the east and around Kharkiv, and then larger territories in the south and around Kherson. Then, the very same experts who predicted that Ukraine would be defeated in a matter of weeks are now worrying about how quickly the defensive is being implemented. The truth is that Ukrainians are continually surprising people by performing at a level that is better than expected, and it is imperative that we should not forget our role, which is to provide financial assistance to them. We are able to give them advice, but in the end, the Ukrainian commanders and the frontline soldiers must make the difficult decisions. It is not possible for us to give them specific instructions on how to fight when we are sitting in Brussels, which houses the headquarters of both NATO and the EU. That is the assignment for them. Stoltenberg stated that all we can do is support the individuals who are putting their lives at danger. The resourcefulness of the Ukrainian people is allowing them to create new weaponry that are giving them an advantage against the Russian aggressors. The Ukrainian Shark UAV is now conducting a search for potential targets in Zaporizhia. This new drone has a range of 50 miles and a flight time of 4 hours. It is highly resistant to electronic warfare and is employed for conducting reconnaissance and designating targets. In total, 5 billion British air defense systems were destroyed with the assistance of this new drone. The Ukrainian operation known as Revenge is still active and has continued to destroy Russian machinery. At this point, the Russian 152mm self-propelled artillery 2S, 19 Mista-S has been eradicated from the battlefield. According to Russian General Andrei Mordvichov, who was interviewed about the incident, the howitzer was taken out at a distance of 12 miles from the drone operator drone view of a Ukrainian Mi-24 Hind gunship attack run with unguided rockets. This is an interesting fact. The war is going to drag on for a very long time. There is little need in discussing exact dates at this time. If we include Eastern Europe in our discussion of what has to be done, the process will, of course, take more time. Is Ukraine merely a staging ground? I couldn't agree more. It's only the beginning of things to come. This is really beyond my comprehension. In spite of the fact that both their military and their country are in disarray, the crazy Russians still harbor ambitions of annexing Europe. The bodies are scattered around 300 lads who are bleeding. They will not be evacuated at this time. On the penalty of one's own life, criminal orders are being taken. Forcibly remove the remaining people, threaten them with weapons, and threaten them with physical force. Criminal orders that have been mobilized under the supervision of the Bakhmut will not be carried out by us. A video message was sent out in which a complaint was made over the illegal directives given by the commanders. The military reconnaissance companies of Regiment 1307 of the 6th Division have reported that they have been fighting in the Bakhmut direction for the past 6 months without receiving any vacation time or being rotated out, and with very few reinforcements and untrained people. They have grown weary of keeping their mouths shut and bearing the pain of losing companions as a result of the careless actions of the command, which has resulted in their suffering severe losses. Help for free to avoid making careless financial losses because of legal orders. You should not go carelessly into the territory of another person armed with weapons and take part in this battle that is essentially unlawful. A video originating in Kazakhstan was discovered. An individual was forced by neighborhood residents to paint over the Arizona sign that was displayed on his vehicle. He apologized for his behavior and attempted to defend himself by pointing out that the first letter of his surname, Zeneviv, is a Z. Another Russian national who was taking part in the so-called special military operation was denied entry into Kazakhstan because the vehicle he was traveling in bore the letter Z. He is enraged and vents his frustration by claiming that Russia is being oppressed. Kazakhstan will become an established nation. You are correct, and you should be my click. You are allowed to click here. The three Shinli in question. However, any myoba the balloons of me, Steve Stanim, given to the Stanska Mashina Katura sword. Brassy you to use the TCP as the prayer blade, the antibiotics to mushroom blades to be room at Ukraine, the USA and Romania will perform combined military drills in the Black Sea and the Danube Delta. Brassy you to use the TCP as the prayer blade. The Romanian Navy has announced that the Sea Breeze 23 drills will take place from the 11th to the 15th of September. There will also be participants from the armed forces of Bulgaria, France, Great Britain, and Turkey in these operations. You already know that this film is the answer that NATO has given to Russian attacks that have taken place near to the Romanian border, which is a member of NATO. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. On the southern front, where Ukrainian forces are attempting to make a breakthrough, there are now positive results. The Ukrainians are at last beginning to see the fruits of their labor after 3 months, as they have begun to carve out a sizable pocket in the line of defense held by the Russians. The way to Robert Tinner and Nova Prokopivka has been opened up by Ukrainian fighters over the course of the past few weeks. As everyone is aware, the Russian occupying forces continue to defy orders and stay put. This route is extremely significant since it provides Ukrainian fighters with an opportunity to internalize their conquest of the triangle formed by Tokmak, Verbova, and Orakov around Robotyne. This is truly incredible to think about. The Ukrainian fighters made effective advantage of the opportunity. Right now, the Ukrainian military achieved a significant advance that has a lot of potential. The Ukrainians eventually succeeded in breaking past the primary Russian defense line that was located in the southeast. After that, fighters from Ukraine began an assault on the positions held by the invaders around Verbova, which is located 14 kilometers away from Robotyne. As a result, the Ukrainian army is making preparations to deploy vital Russian logistics. It is also the reason why units of the newly established 25th Combined Arms Army have been deployed to the front line by the Russian army. It's interesting to note that the formation of this new army was part of a larger plan to ramp up the intensity of the conflict over the long term. However, because the situation on the front was so precarious, the Russians were compelled to deliver them there as quickly as possible. The 25th Combined Arms Army won't be ready for battle until at least 2024, according to the intelligence provided by the Ukrainian government. The adversary is suffering from a severe lack of staff at the present time. The army does not even come close to having the strength of 2 divisions, and they have not even finished their training yet. It had been anticipated that the 25th Army would resupply its men in the Luhansk region. Having said that, it is extremely stretched. On the other hand, the more seasoned forces of the 41st Army are being redeployed in the direction of the top mark. The Russians are in a bit of a pickle at the moment because they have already lost the strongest stronghold south of Robert Inner. In addition, the Russians planned and carried out an information operation. The Russians, who were occupying Ukraine and acting rogue, released bogus documents saying that the Ukrainians had instructions to execute any Russian soldiers who surrendered to them. These documents were fake. The purpose of this intelligence operation is to instill fear in Russian forces and motivate them to continue the battle until it is won, rather than to capitulate. Journalists have pointed out that this week's incursion of Ukrainian forces into Russian territory was a very minor event with potentially significant repercussions. Every kilometer that the Ukrainian forces advance takes their artillery one step closer to hitting Russian objectives that were previously unattainable, such as the highways and train lines that run through the regional center city of Tokmak. In addition, for every kilometer that the Ukrainian forces advance, the M14 motorway continues to run down the country's southeastern shore. Russia relies on this highway to convey essential supplies, thus its destruction would be catastrophic for the country. If Ukrainian forces were successful in traversing the minefield ditches and cement blockades that are together referred to as the Dragon's Teeth, it would mean that they have surmounted challenges that Russia believes are impossible. After then, another tremor will be felt throughout Russia. A significant number of Moscow's most capable soldiers have been sent to the front lines. Trent Telenko, a former officer from the Defense Contract Management Agency at the Pentagon, provided some commentary earlier today. It's possible that Tokmak will be the most important adjacent target for Ukrainian forces to push on. On the other hand, it's possible that Ukrainian soldiers won't be able to begin an assault on the city. If the troops from Kiev are successful in pushing the front line around 9 kilometers outside of Tokmak, then the artillery of the Ukrainian army will be able to hit the railroad and road lines. Even if the front is pushed back 9 kilometers, the situation remains the same. Even without coming particularly near to the target, this action has the potential to render Tokmak useless as a road or rail transportation node. With each additional kilometer of advancement, Ukraine's longer-range ground-launched rockets are able to target a greater number of Russian facilities. Mobile launches built by Western manufacturers in Ukraine, such as the Mars HIMARS and the M270, can fire projectiles with a maximum range of 80 kilometers. The M14 highway is located approximately 50 miles to the south of Robertyna and Verbova. Nevertheless, for reasons related to safety, the launches are required to remain a few miles back from the front. Because of this, the recent gains that Ukraine has made have not yet brought them within the line of fire of the Russian supply artery. There have also been several pieces published by journalists on this topic. The chiefs of the Ukrainian military have high hopes that if they can break through the Russian front at Verbova, they would be able to build a much larger breach and then fill it with hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles built in the west. In the region between Tokmak and Verbova, Ukrainian fighters who had been laying down heavy fire on the opposing forces pushed a little further north. This time, Ukrainian fighters made it all the way to the first main defense line of the Russian occupation army, which was located close to the Orakov direction. As a countermeasure, the adversary is now advancing into Kupian in an effort to draw the attention of Ukraine away from the forthcoming counterattack. In the vicinity of the Oracle, the Russian Federation's occupying army, which is primarily made up of units from the 58th Combined Arms Army and the Air Force, is currently attempting to put a stop to the counter-offensive being mounted by the Ukrainian military. Concurrently, the Russian occupiers are pushing forward with their offensive in the Kupiansk region that is located in eastern Ukraine. According to reports from British intelligence, the Russian invaders are likely attempting to divert Ukraine's attention away from their counteroffensive. Since the beginning of Ukraine's counteroffensive in June, Russia has achieved some incremental advancements close to Kupiansk. It is likely that the occupants are attempting to make a profit from this situation by continuing to supply the Axis. At the same time, the British intelligence community has observed that Russia runs the risk of dividing its forces in order to halt the advancement of Ukraine. We can see significant enemy casualties heading in the direction of Terisky from a little further to the southwest. The Tavrotsky direction encompasses the Zaporizhia region as well as a portion of the Donetsk region, and it also includes the front line that leads to Avdiivka. In the last few days, the Russian occupation forces in Tavrotsky have suffered 183 casualties as a result of their current position. Following a heavy assault by Ukrainian forces in this direction, the Russian Federation lost an additional 136 servicemen who were injured in the conflict. Alexander Tanovsky, who is the commander of the operational strategic group of troops in Tavria, extended his congratulations to our Ukrainian fighters for their achievement at the position. During the same event, Tarnowski stated that the fighting abilities of the Ukrainians have achieved nirvana during the course of the last day. 1,407 rounds were fired by the artillery units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. In the same general direction, Ukrainian forces launched an assault on hostile positions, which resulted in the destruction of 18 pieces of military equipment held by the adversary. 1 Russian tank, 2 armored combat vehicles, 8 artillery systems and mortars, 2 Ukrainian versus, 4 pieces of automotive equipment, and 1 piece of specialized equipment were all destroyed by the Ukrainian armed forces. During these operations, a total of 9 warehouses containing ammunition that belonged to the occupiers were demolished as well. In spite of the indisputable progress that our Ukrainian fighters have achieved, which is plain to see, there is still a great deal of work to be done. There are indications that the adversary is devoting a significant amount of resources into the task of defending the line. To begin, the adversary has suffered significant losses in both artillery and special personnel in the region. This has resulted in the formation of multiple divisions, all of which are coordinated in some way and have only a small percentage of their work finished. The Russians made active connections to the aviation industry. After then, there was an increase in the frequency with which drones approached our locations. There were some instances in which a drone showed up every half an hour. These assaults do not really aid the adversary very much at all. In point of fact, there is one thing that has been brought to our attention as a result of these attacks, and that is the Russians' extremely frenzied desire to throw away everything. To provide a brief summary, Ukrainian fighters have taken the initial steps, which are the most difficult ones. The assault forces of the Ukrainian military were able to achieve a considerable deal of success against an adversary that had never been attacked under such circumstances before. The adversary's defensive position resulted in such significant losses for them that they were forced to block the line with a variety of unmanned units. In any event, it's clear that the adversary is playing defense right now. We are currently in a pivotal era. Either the adversary will be able to rapidly close this rapidly increasing gap in defense, or the Ukrainian armed forces will gain a few more positions. One of these two outcomes is likely to occur. It is plain to observe that Ukrainian military are methodically driving back the Russian invaders who have landed in the southern part of their country. This is something that everyone else in the globe can see as well. The defenders succeed in overcoming meters of enemy mental fortifications on a daily basis. The Ukrainian Navy is currently engaged in combat along a line that stretches southward along the 2158 road where it crosses the Mokryala River. Since the beginning of the counter-attack in this direction, the Marines have been successful in capturing multiple settlements. The Ukrainian sailors who are fighting against the Russians on the road to Mario in the Donetsk region were visited by Western journalists so that they could have a more in-depth view at the situation. Maxim, an experienced sailor who is currently serving in Eurozina, gave an interview to Western media. Following the first and second lines, there will be a road that leads directly to the sea. There will be no fortifications in this section. We are going to move at the speed of rockets. As can be seen, the Ukrainian fighters are quite certain that they will emerge victorious from this conflict. When combined with this self-assurance and composure, success is unavoidable. We appreciate you keeping an eye on us.